Let's bring in now Sabir Ibrahimi. He is a non-resident fellow at the Centre on International Cooperation and previously worked with the UK Department for International Development in Afghanistan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gerald.
So I'm going to start with some broad strokes here to ask, what are some of the biggest changes in Afghanistan have been over the last 20 years? We talk a lot about women's rights. What else?
Women's rights were one of the achievements of the last 20 years, but also Afghanistan had a pretty much a liberal and progressive media over the last 20 years that was incomparable to other countries in the region. For example, Afghanistan was doing better in terms of freedom index than Pakistan, India, and Iran. And obviously, there were thousands of Afghans who got education abroad, including in Pakistan, India, China, the United States, and Europe. So there are lots of achievements, but obviously there were lots of failures as well.
Such as what then?
What is it?
Could you expound on these failures then?
Well, failures is that Afghanistan wanted to experiment a democracy, and unfortunately, the government was corrupt, and democracy never actually found its way to Afghanistan. Although there were movements and there were some groups that have reached political maturity, but overall, it was a quasi-democratic system that did not really represent the entire Afghanistan. And including, some of the grievances that the Taliban had from the government were accurate at the time.
So democracy didn't quite work. And judging now by this lineup of the new Afghan cabinet we're seeing, the Taliban had promised to be inclusive, representative. Now they're saying it's only temporary. But how likely do you think they can keep that promise?
So Taliban is a failed experiment too. Before the democracy that we had in Afghanistan, the Taliban were ruling Afghanistan. They're a failed theocracy then, and I think they'll be a failed theocracy now, unless they agree to some sort of power sharing that could include all other minorities and majorities and women and everybody else.
And so with the Taliban now back in power, do you fear regression in Afghanistan?
Definitely, Taliban represent regression. If you look at their belief system, they want to rule the country based on religion, and there's very little room for freedoms of 21st century freedoms that some countries are enjoying, such as freedom of speech, freedom of women being able to go to work, women being able to elect into office. Right now, for instance, their cabinet has 0 women in it, and they have already started segregating Afghanistan schools, as well as even in workspace, there are some segregation. It's underway. So I think there are a lot of the country will be taken back, as opposed to going forward in a lot of ways.
Sabir, very quickly, and could something else have been done that would have led to a different outcome than what we have today, with a strong democratically elected government still in power in Afghanistan, perhaps?
Definitely. So I mentioned about the issue of corruption, the issue of ethnic tensions within the previous government. But also the interferences of Afghanistan neighbors who wanted a different outcome, who wanted their clients to be in charge. So now we are where we are. And I think if the Taliban also did not push for a military win and focused on negotiations in Doha and other countries who have offered to help to facilitate negotiations and a transitional government, I think we would have seen a different outcome, not the humanitarian crisis that Afghanistan is under right now, as well as not the isolation that Afghanistan is going to go through in the coming future.
Sabir Ibrahimi is with the Centre on International Cooperation at NYU. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Still